Good evening. I pray all is well with you and your families. Um, Let me try something here. I pray that all is well with you and your families. And I apologize for the the quick setback, but we will continue. All right. I hope I can be heard, and for the persons who will go back and search up this teaching and play it another time. God bless you as well. It feels wonderful to come to you. My personal Facebook page got hacked, and it's been hacked for over a month now. Um, but I'm using the church social media platform, and I'm grateful for that. We discussed uh, recently, last week, matter of fact, we discussed diagnosing your church. So many people have a recollection of where their church is, but we must remember church is not a building. Church is a people. All right. Let me say it again. Church is not a building. It is a people. And if we ever want to get over the hurdle, so to speak, of greatness, continuing in a spirit of excellence, we've got to be intentional about being great and making sure that we are actually a biblical church, because I think was um discussed last week, there can be a mass crowd of people, but that necessarily biblically biblically that doesn't mean anything. And there might be um, a small amount of people that can mean something. So again, I want to challenge the body of Christ to diagnose their church, diagnose their local assembly, because so many times we allow gossip, hearsay to wreak havoc in our churches when we do not diagnose them properly. So wanted to share, and also I wanted to thank so many people who reach out to me and my family during our time of bereavement. Um, Losing my grandmother was who was a biblical a biblical example in our life, and she was that person, and we're gonna miss her, but God had a purpose for her living 96 years. That we have nothing to be be bashful about, be ashamed about, or nothing. 96 years is a long time. I think was the late Howard Slim Hunt who said, if you live in these days to see 50 years old, that's a blessing. So again, I want to thank the people for reaching out, text message, and just reaching out, saying that I'm sorry for your loss. And so I appreciate that. And Godspeed. I bid you Godspeed, and I thank God for 96 years. So one thing about leaving this world, we have no control over that, and it's something in the makeup of a human. We will never get over it, so to speak, but God will give us the grace to get through it, if that makes sense. So, um, if some persons who are online can hear me, okay, just give me a thumbs up, and I will hasten on, and I will go on. Um, I will go on regardless. We we were talking last week about diagnosing our churches, and we paused. We had a week pause. It's been a week long pause. We had a week pause on um the systems of the church. Our churches are made up of systems. Some individuals don't like it the way the church perhaps is structured, the makeup of the church, what the church is doing, etc. However, um, it's still the responsibility of the church to be stern, don't go nowhere, on being disciplined with action. Okay, whatever the rules are, it's important to yield to those prerequisites prerequisites that are for us. So I want to challenge us tonight with this lesson as we continue with the teaching, diagnosing our church. The prerequisites that we have, thank God that we need some kind of infrastructure, some type of stability, some type of structure in place so that things does not go haywire. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and start our lesson tonight. All right. When we look the at the systems of local assemblies, of what comes to mind when we have these perplexing issues that cause the churches to plateau, and better yet, to possibly die. Jesus the Christ stated something in Matthew 16:18 that I think is relevant today. He says, his church would be victorious against the gates of hell. Jesus says something special about the church In Matthew's gospel, Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Barjona, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but," y'all see that? "But my Father, who he is the person, all right, and he gives the location, who is in heaven. And I said to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades or hell will not or shall not prevail against it." All right. And I will give you the keys to of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very important that we understand the follow. All right. Jesus says that certain things are going to be evident in the church's life, and one is that Hades or hell will be against the church. This is systems of the human anatomy, systems of the body. If we notice, we only have one body. Now there's 11 systems, body systems, but I think here we only have 7. We just want to give an example of how the human body works, and we want to equate that to the church. Okay, you got in each one of the functions there, each one of those anatomies there, you have systems. First of all, you have the integumentary system, and that is the largest organ we have. It is the skin organ. Our skin, believe it or not, it protects us, and we need our skin. Secondly, is the respiratory system. It's a blessing from God that we do not need any assistance with oxygen, carrying around oxygen tanks to breathe. It's just the little things we should be grateful and thankful for. All right. Now, third of all is the skeletal system. We have bones. Our human anatomy is it, we have bones in our body. If we touch our body, we can feel our bones. Okay. Next, we have the muscular system. Okay. We have muscles. I often say this all the time. Everybody has muscles. How well developed they are, that depends upon the person. Me myself, I want to be a preacher that's healthy, so I work out at least 5 days a week. At least 5 days a week. Okay. So working out, thank God, I'm not trying to impress nobody. I'm not in high school anymore. I'm not trying to impress nobody. I just want to keep myself going. Okay. We have a muscular system. We have also a digestive system. Okay. A digestive system. Okay. When we eat certain foods, it takes time for certain foods to digest and process. So it takes those foods certain amounts of time to process and digest and all of that. Next, we have the circulatory system. And finally, we have the central nervous system. Again, there's 11 systems, but I only have 7. But the whole picture is one system affects another. If something is wrong with one of those systems, it's going to affect another system. I remember years ago, I was carrying my youngest daughter in my parents' house. So as she was asleep, of course, and I was holding her, but I ended up on the ground because I I didn't realize this, but my parents at night, armadillos will come in the yard and they will find certain worms and dig holes in the ground. And my ankle was messed up. I messed up one of my ankles, and it popped, and I couldn't put any weight on it, and I couldn't work. I was working. I was bivocational at the time, and as I began to walk on my ankle, I had a friend. He's gone on to be with the Lord now. They buried him a couple of weeks ago. He told me, said, "You are compensating for your injury." I compensated my whole body for my injury. And what that entails, church, there I was with my circulatory system, muscle system, and my skeletal system. I began to compensate it, and therefore it began to affect other systems. Same way in the church. One system affects another system. So it's important and it's imperative that we make sure that we have the proper systems in place. You know, sometimes when people just say they join the church, right? We'll say you are governed by the rules and regulations. Well, what if they do not know any rules and regulations? So it's important that we have a new members orientation class. Okay, it's important that we have that. So um, it's good to let persons know what the organization or the church is about and what is to be expected of those persons, because it seems like we abide by certain rules, but we do what we want to do when it comes to the church. Remember, I often say it, and I say it again tonight. Church members do what they want to do. However, church disciples do what they've been taught to do. Teaching, my fellow brothers and sisters, is very important. Teaching is very important. A system we need in the church. Here's a system we need in the church, and that's assimilation. Assimilation. The assimilation system is determined how to move from first time guests into members. Every church needs an assimilation process because too many people come through the front door and back door of the church too quickly. Therefore, a mindset of ministry needs to be created and developed through the assimilation process, because the goal should be to make first time visitors becoming faithful disciples. Okay, that's why it's important. I do believe for the pastor to make a connection with the people. Shake as many hands, hug as many people as you possibly can. Because when we forfeit that, when we neglect to do that, that shows that we are not privy, or we are not exercising fellowship. Koinonia is a practice that all of us should have as Christians and as believers. There's in the church, per se, there's a swinging door, because as soon as people join, somebody's leaving. All right. So it's important for the church to have an assimilation process. That's what Paul talks about. I believe it's in First Timothy. The Apostle Paul talks about not letting a novice do something too quickly. Sometimes we are so gung-ho on a person doing something for God, yet we forget that those persons need to prove themselves over a period of time. It's very important that y'all hear me good, each person go through the assimilation process. There needs to be assimilation. Thank you for coming to the church. Come on to the church. But what we want to do, we want to have a clear vision. We want to make you a visitor. We want to make you a disciple. We want you to become not just a visitor, but we want you to become a disciple. So it's very important that we have systems in place. And I've learned this of course, over the years, that a lot of people, I can't say all people, but some people don't like order. Some people do not like structure. It's important for the church to have those things, because if a church does not have those things, the church will basically go for anything. So assimilation, we want to not just make those persons visitors, They consistently come, but the main goal is to make those persons disciples of the church. And again, they are not joining a building, they are joining a people. Remember, God does not want us to become a monument. We should become a movement, because when we settle for monumental status, we are stuck on yesterday's success. And yesterday's success is nothing but as my friend says, frozen tradition. And when tradition is frozen, sometimes we relish, we remember the victories of the past, but we are not doing nothing in the present. So assimilation is needed. All right. Next is stewardship. How do you give? One thing about it, I've noticed over my course of time of being in the ministry, most people have the most complaints, create the most gossip, create a lot of turmoil in the church. Most of the time, they don't give. Their stewardship is lacking. All right. The stewardship process is designed to move persons to be radical in their giving. Although too often churches cannot do relevant ministry due to very, let me say it again, very, very limited capacity of financial resources. The stewardship system should be taught and often remind disciples of their stewardship, and to remind them of what God requires of us. That's what God requires of us, to be good stewards. And not only as we had hope, they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. That's Second Corinthians 8:5. All right. Moreover, it is required. The Baptist church has deacons. The Methodist church has stewards. All right. So here's what First Corinthians 4:2 says. Moreover, it is required in stewards that one is found faithful. See, stewardship, ladies and gentlemen, has to deal with more than money. Let me say that again. Stewardship has to deal with more. Let me say that again, more than money. Many folk think stewardship just deals with money, but no. How faithful are you? It is required that a steward be faithful. That means if my favorite person does not come to worship, I come. I've been found faithful. I'm going to do what's right. What I do may not be popular, but I'm going to be faithful. My faithfulness, watch this, ladies and gentlemen, your and my faithfulness sometimes it causes frustration to others. You missed it. Your and my faithfulness to God sometimes causes frustration to others. Church is not a show. All right. It takes financial responsibility and to do what's necessary so that the stewardship process can go on. We can be good stewards of what God has blessed us with. And also, as we become radical in giving, I have to say this because at a certain junction in my life, I was this. I gave 20% of my income. I gave more than 10. Some people can give more than 10%. Some people can give way beyond that. And it doesn't hurt them. How faithful are you when it comes to being a steward of the Lord? How faithful will you be when it comes to the stewardship ministry? Because one thing about it, it takes money for ministry to run. Okay. One thing about the church has heard me say this multiple times. Dick Gregory says what he has against the church is the church always collects its money last. In the world, it lets you know up front it don't trust you. Uncle Sam, he take taxes out of our checks before we even touch it. Why? Because he knows that we can't be trusted. So he takes the money out first. All right. You go to Walmart or Target. I know some of you may be fasting from Target and Walmart, etc. But if you go there when the fast is over, if you go there, you're gonna pay some money. You're not gonna get and possess what you possess freely. It's gonna cost you. All right. If you go to your favorite restaurant, whatever you have a passion for on that day, even if it's McDonald's or Dairy Queen, some fast food joint, or you can look up at the menu or down at the menu. Either way, you're going to pay. All right. Either way, you're going to pay. So when it comes to the church, there's nothing wrong with the church being faithful when it comes to stewardship. It is required that we be faithful. Some people are not faithful. All right. Some people are sometimey. That's what my grandma used to say sometimes. People are sometimey. And God requires, scripture requires that stewards be faithful. All right. So we need assimilation and we need stewardship. Third of all, we need evangelism. Evangelism. How to attract people to our church. This system is to gather strategies and systems that will attract persons to your ministry context. All churches need to be evangelistic minded and have a plan and process by which will accomplish their evangelistic needs by seeking the lost. Here it is, and making disciples. God has, and there is enough people in churches for us not to sheep swap, but there are persons who, and I thank God for our church, because there's been all kinds of people who have came from all walks of life, and they have um, went through certain experiences. They've come to the church, and what we want to do, we want to have, I believe every church should have this. We ought to have magnetic ministry. We ought to have something that's attractive to individuals. We ought to have something that's going to bring persons in. All right. We ought to be attractive. We need magnetic ministry that will be magnetive or magnetized to persons. All right. So evangelism is very important. This is how important evangelism is. There is no guarantee in evangelism that a person will join and be a part of your church. But it's important that that person makes the decision to become a disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's no guarantee that a person will join and be a part of your local assembly. That's what evangelism is all about. I have no problem with some people say 30 some people join, 50 some people join, 100 and some people join. However, whatever the number is, how many disciples do we have? How many people have took time to make sure that these persons become disciples? How many people have no doubt joined but not went through the swinging door? So if assimilation is important, stewardship is important, evangelism is important, and the next one is, I love this. We had a high time last night. We had a very good discussion last night. Small group, I call it growth groups. Everything we do is tailored around growth. All right. This particular system is tailored to teach persons in small groups, which will allow them to, here it is, reproduce spiritually and become spiritual mature among their peers. Small groups is what it is. Some pastors get upset because 20 people didn't come on for small groups. Small groups, you make it 5. You make it 3. It's a small group. And what we want to discuss relevant topics, relevant discussions. And guess what? I don't do all the talking. persons help me, and as I minister, they minister to me too, because I can learn something from what they experienced. I hope I'm making sense. I hope I'm making sense. So small groups is very important. And what I like about our discussion on last night, it's not on social media. It's private. It's done privately, but I do it with persons who are interested in growing by the grace of God, and they grow through the vehicle of small groups. And I'm grateful to God that we are having healthy discussions. And again, I don't do all the talking. I let them read certain things, and we just discuss certain things. And I thank God for the life lessons. I call them life lessons that I can make applicable to my life. I can apply them to my life and make them applicable. Okay. So having a church need a small group. We're worried about if they come to Sunday school or not. That's a trend. We need, because the people in the Bible went to church every day. We just do it on Sunday. And most of the people in the Bible, they went to house churches. Okay? They had churches in homes, in houses. Also, when the Lord taught, he always sat when he taught. He wasn't like us in the West. We stand, but Jesus, he sat. He sat down. So having small groups is very helpful. And a modern day church needs small groups. All right. And we need to be open minded in making ways to enhance our small groups. We don't do it every week, we do it bi weekly. I don't want to tire people out, because I know we have more obligations during the week to do. However, those persons who were on last night and the other times before, we had some good discussions, some good, healthy discussions on whatever topic we was talking about. And again, we call them growth groups, and every discussion is centered and tailored around growth. Okay. All right. The next one is this: worship. All right. It's very important. We got to plan our worship. It says the system of worship planning should be based upon how to improve the worship by implementing different things to worship, by making worship more impactful. How can preaching, teaching improve? The problem is many people think they know what preaching is, but they really don't. Dr. Frank Ray calls it, he describes it this way. I love the way he describes preaching. Preaching causes them to come to the church. However, teaching causes them to stay at the church. How can singing, devotion, or praise and worship improve? What are the essentials and non-essentials? And for the non-traditional church, I think we have to be careful because even though we are not tradition, we can make things a tradition. Even though there might be a tradition at an established church, but they can become a tradition at a non-traditional church. So every preacher should ask themselves that question: how can I improve on teaching and preaching? How can I make myself better? Every singer ought to raise that question. If they are a devotional leader or they are part of a praise team with praise and worship, they ought to ask themselves that question: how can I improve? All right. And that's what COVID taught us as church. COVID taught us not to do those non-essential things, because whatever is non-essential is non-essential. It's not gonna work. Okay. But whatever is essential, we we continue to do that. All right. So we need to plan our worship so that worship is not predicted. All right. And sometimes we might it, it can go for me, it can go for the next person. Sometimes we can get dormant and we can be predictable. But God doesn't want us to be, I believe, predictable. The worship experience. We ought to have pure, energetic people that's going to worship. And I'm talking about having a place in your heart to worship God despite what people think or feel. All right. I'm not going to be swayed because your feelings are on your sleeves. I hope I'm talking to somebody. I'm not going to be swayed in any kind of way because your feelings are on your sleeves. Okay. Here's the next thing. We need volunteers, ministry volunteers. We need that. Now that's ministry volunteers is a system that allows person to discover their spiritual gifts while volunteering in the service of ministry. Now I know that word volunteers is something that you normally now don't see in ministry, because when people do something now, they're most of the time, some of the time, most of the time, they're not going to volunteer. They gonna want some type of compensation. So thank God for the persons that is volunteering. All right. In the words of one pastor, if whether you are volunteered or paid, you still a part of the staff. All right. So volunteers is important. However, people, we are in 2025, and most of the time people now want compensation. All right. The next is leadership. To engage the leaders of the local assembly to embrace a passion to lead with a spirit of excellence, integrity, and inspiration. John Maxwell says everything rises and falls on leadership. How well do you lead is important. All right. And one thing about leadership, John Maxwell says, if you want to be liked, sell ice cream. When you are a leader, there's a level that a package rather that comes with leadership, and that's critique. Some people are going to consider you a good leader. Some people are going to consider you a bad leader. You don't worry about that. You don't tailor your leadership off of the opinion of another person. All right? You don't do that. Because some people are critiquing not to give constructive criticism. Some people just like critiquing. They like criticizing. If they're not doing it, it's a problem. So you lead the best way you lead. And when you lead, don't try to lead like somebody else. Lead the best way you can. We need leadership. So next is strategy. All right. Leaders need to have a strategy to ministry in order to be effective within their ministry context and community. They must determine what works and what doesn't work with honesty. In addition, they must be flexible at trying new methods to see a consistent flow within the systems. Okay. So it's important, my friends, to be at a certain place of having a strategy. And when a person is having a strategy, they have structure. All right. When a person, again, has strategy, they have a structure. There's a certain structure because there's a strategy. A strategy means that a person has took the time not just to pray about it, not just to think about it, but also to ponder about the pros and the cons of the strategy. And some people, they get feedback. And once again, as we talked in the growth groups last night, sometimes feedback does not make you weak. It takes growth in a person to receive feedback. Y'all hear me? I got one more slide, and then I'm gonna be done. But we need strategy. And what the church needs to do now, we need to be, this is what COVID taught us. We need to be intentional. We mean to do what we did. We got to do what we did for an outcome. And let me give you this last slide. Then I'm done. God doesn't want people to do what they think is best. He wants them to do what he knows is best. And no amount of reasoning and intellectualizing will discover that. We need faithful people who are going to get the job done. That's what we need. We need persons who will get the job done. We don't need persons just standing in the way and want to be seen, because Jesus Christ says they have their reward. Their reward is they want to be seen of men. But I want to challenge the people at Relevant. At the Relevant Church, we're gonna do it right. No matter if we don't have but two people, two or three, as long as we are gathered in the name of the Lord, he said, I'll be in the midst. And so it's very important, very imperative for the Lord to be in the midst. The late Dr. Gardner C. Taylor says this way. He's not worried about the large crowd because the body might have an infection. And we want to be at a place all the time to where we can diagnose our church and see where we are and be honest with ourselves. And be honest with the Spirit of God. All right. We all can adjust and improve. And that's what we need to intentionally take time to do. All right. I hope you enjoyed this lesson tonight, and we'll see you next week. I thank you for coming on tonight. God bless you again. Thank to everybody who reached out, contacted me about the loss of my grandmother. 96 years is a blessing, and pray for the Booker family as well. Miss Roche Booker lost her daughter, so pray for the family as they get ready to lay their loved one to rest tomorrow. Please pray for them and keep them and believe in prayer, not just praying in routine, but in believing prayer. Pray for them. And God bless you and God keep you is my prayer. Peace out. Take care.